And we're going to go through a little PSA submission. Now, we submitted a ton of cards for PSAs, so we've learned the process pretty well. We started doing this back in about 2020 when the boom hit, and we waited, of course, about 2 years for our PSA submissions to come back, but we're going to go through it now. So it's the Professional Grading Card Service, PSA. It's typically the one you'll hear about the most. There'll be Beckett, CGC, TAG, and then HGA, the hybrid grading. You'll see some of those out there, but PSA is kind of the standard. It's been around forever, and it's the one that's going to get you probably your biggest bang for your buck. Do the slabs look the best? Not always, but they are very nice looking slabs. So let's check it out. Now, Professional Sports Authenticator is what PSA stands for. So it's the world leader in sports card grading. It's been around forever, just like I'd said. You'd see some of these slabs from back in the early 2000s all the time. Now, they authenticate and they grade cards. It doesn't matter whether it's a PSA submission you're sending just to get graded for how perfect the card is, or if you're sending something in for possible authentication on an autograph. They can do dual services on those. They can grade the autograph, or not grade the autograph. They can grade the card, or they can just authenticate the card and say the card is authentic and the autograph is authentic. Okay. Now, what this does is this increases card values. You'll notice that for most modern cards, a PSA card that's in a PSA 9 is typically going to be about the same value as raw. Sometimes a little bit more, but usually it's pretty close. A PSA 10, though, can double, even triple a card value. So yes, it is worth it for the investing purposes. Now, what are some of the key benefits for grading cards? Increasing the value, knowing the card is authentic. You can also add them to your collection. They're very nice to have on a shelf, and they are a good collector's item to have for investing purposes later on. Now, your scale for PSA cards, you've got your PSA 1 versus your PSA 10. Now, the gem mint, the population is what you look on when you go to look for a card. Some cards will gem mint out pretty good. There'll be a 40, 50, maybe 60% hit rate if you send them out for gem mint population of a 10. You'll look through these and you'll see that you have the PSA 9, PSA 1. There are collectors out there and they can reach a premium. Now, for any older cards, you're looking at maybe XY era and earlier, a PSA 8, a PSA 9, or a PSA 7 can still fetch a pretty good price because those cards are older and they were tougher to grade. Now, you can look at some of your older cards. Let's say you have a base set Charizard, and it comes in as a PSA 6. You may look at the card and say, wow, it looks pretty nice, but there's not a lot of whitening on the back. I'm not sure what happened. Some of the older cards, the quality control just wasn't there. And some of the cards they mass produced, the quality control wasn't there. Take Burning Shadows, for instance. Burning Shadows has a Rainbow Charizard. It's a fabulous card. It grades out very tough because Burning Shadows quality control was absolutely atrocious. You saw this a lot with XY era cards as well. Now, PSA offers multiple submission levels. I buy a membership every year is what I do. And when I do this, I end up having access to some of the grading levels that are not as typical. Okay. Now you have your express grading, 10 business days. It's about $150 a card. It's going to have a higher card value, though, typically is what you're going to do. These will be cards you'd want to have graded right away if a set just comes out and releases. So, for instance, Prismatic Evolutions, the Umbreon, SIR. When that card first came out in the PSA 10, it was right around that $4,000, maybe $5,000 range. Now, it's still a very heavily sought card. It's a $1,600 raw, but it's close to about $3,300 in a PSA 10. But if you're the first one that's out there at the PSA 10 value, usually those cards can reach a higher value. Okay. Now, you'll see there where it says recommended for higher value modern cards. The reason for this is because older cards just are tougher to grade out. Now, you have your regular grading. It's $100 per card, 20 business day. You'll notice there's no minimum on these. You can send just one card in or multiple cards in at this price level. Okay. Now, the $100 one, that's what a lot of people send in when they have some older cards that look pretty nice or some modern ones. They think, hey, maybe this will come in and it'll be a fairly decent card value. The economy grading, 50 business days, $50 per card. It's a budget-friendly option for the less valuable cards, but 50 is still pretty high. So you have to look at your card and say, hey, if this comes back as a 9, was it worth just selling raw versus sending it in to get graded? Because if you have a card that maybe grades out at a 9 and it's only worth about $55 in a raw condition, that $50 grading for it was not worth it because you're losing a lot of money on that end. Now, some other levels of this we'll talk about is sometimes PSA will run some levels where it'll be $15 grading, $20 grading. Sometimes they'll do that, but they have to have for TCG Modern. A lot of these, what they'll be is a minimum of 20 cards, and it's usually about a 2-month turnaround time. I have two submissions right now at PSA, a 140 card submission and a 211 card submission. The 140 card submission right now should be done around April 1st is the projection. The 211 card submission, I'm not sure. That one's been there for a month right now, and it's still not in the process of even being checked in. They have the cards, but they haven't went through and verified what they are. So right now, the lag time on these cards can be pretty heavy. So if you're sending stuff in for PSA, just know that the market can shift while your cards are there at PSA. Now, your submission process for this, you got to prepare your cards. Typically, you want to wear gloves when you're doing this, and you want to clean them off with a microfiber towel. You want to make sure you're not etching or putting any scratches into the hollow. Okay, using soft cotton gloves can help this from oils and stuff getting from your hands to on the card. This can also cause some smearing, and it can cause things to stick to it that can make them scratch when they're inside a penny sleeve or being shipped. You want to inspect the cards for damage. Typically, a magnifying glass can work pretty well for this. A UV light can also tell the scratches that are on there for hollow. And then you can also just use, besides a magnifying glass, your phone's camera, and you can zoom in. You also want to check for any whitening on the edges on the outside, typically on the back. Any damage on the corners, make sure there's no creases. Okay? You want to protect your cards in a penny sleeve. Now, there's plenty of protective penny sleeves that are out there. I typically use the cheap ones that you buy from Walmart that are clear plastic. Okay. Now, once you do this, you have to put them in a semi-rigid card saver. These are going to be the ones that are very flexible. They're not going to be the ones that are kind of rigid. I think I have one back here. So this right here is a PSA semi-rigid card, and you can see how it flexes. These are the ones you want to put it in. You open the card up, you stick it in there. Okay. So for instance, if I put this card in a penny sleeve and then I stick it in there, all right, now it's ready to go. One card per sleeve. Okay. You can use team bags if you'd like as well. There's some team bags back here. I would definitely not use a team bag if I'm sending them in. These are rigid. These are flimsy. Okay. I would not do that. Now, you want to avoid using top loaders for submissions. And the reason for that is because the actual employees at PSA have to pull these cards out, and it's going to decrease the chance of damaging. So you'll see with these, you'll be able to go right in there. They can open it up, pull the card right out. With top loaders, typically they have to tap it down to get the card going. So something to think about there. Now, when you do this, you're going to print off your submission you're going to have from PSA. You do not pay for the service right away. You pay for it after it's done. They will charge your card then. Now, this is where it can get a little bit sketchy, is when you send the cards in, they can either have them at the PSA vault or they can send them back to you, but you have to pay for them first. Either way. Now, if the card you send in, let's say it's a $20 submission, it'll have a value at $200. If it exceeds that value of $200, according to PSA, then that means they can upcharge you. And they can say, hey, that card wasn't a $20 one. We have to charge you $50 or $100 for that card because it's highly priced. So, for instance, if you did have the Umbreon SIR for Prismatic, this would be upcharged. You'd probably be charged anywhere from $100 to $200 for the grading of that card in a PSA 7, 8, 9, 10 level. Doesn't matter. It's because that card has the potential to be very valuable. So, something to definitely think about. Some people will use a credit card for this, and they'll have the credit card on hold or shut off until PSA is ready to charge them. Then PSA will email you and say, hey, we tried to run your card, but it did not run yet. Can you give us another card number? That's so you're not getting funds taken out of your account when you're not ready for it, because PSA will send you the grades and they charge the card right then. They do not give you the grades first. Now, with the PSA app, it makes it super easy. So when you go on the PSA app, I'll pull it up right here, all right? So when you're on the PSA app online, it makes it very easy to do, and you can check your progress of your orders and stuff with your submissions. PSA app's unbelievable. It does a great job, and you can go on here and actually scan cards as well. So there's my two submissions right there, and then if I want to scan a card, I just click on it, and when I scan it, it does a great job of just scanning the card and showing up there for my submission. If you're going to submit on PSA, I would do it on the app versus the website. It makes it much easier. Now, submission process, just like we talked about, you for an online submission, you go to PSA website or you can use the app. You have to create an account, select the submission type, fill out the submission form. That'll be automatically filling out as you're submitting the cards, and you have to print the shipping labels. If you're sending this versus FedEx, UPS, or USPS, you have a different shipping label for all three of those. Make sure you print off the correct one. Now you want to pack the cards securely. Typically, you want to use a box and you want to rubber band the cards together. So if you have a stack of cards, okay, they're all in these nice little savers from PSA. You want to put about, if you're sending 50 cards in, maybe take about half of them, put cardboard on the front, and on the back and rubber band around that makes sure they're not actually on the cards. By doing this, you'll keep them from shifting around when they get shipped. Okay. Now, when you ship them to PSA, you're not guaranteed they're going to be submitted right away. This could take a process. It could take anywhere from weeks to multiple weeks to even months to get them actually input. Right now in the Pokemon market, there's a huge influx for this, so it's really tough to get your orders back fast. Now, pricing, value, and considerations. Factors affecting grade and value. The card's original condition. You find some cards from when you were younger that you carried around in your pocket, it's going to decrease the value because of the damage they have on there. Now, the card's original condition versus the rarity of the card also isn't a factor, because if you have a very rare card, even if condition's bad, it can still be worth quite a bit of money. Players' popularity. Cards that are very playable do not always matter on the grading, because they're there for playing, not grading. So if a card's very playable, typically people won't grade them as much because they'll usually play them in tournaments. Historical significance. When you see this, you're going to see cards that are going down in history as some of the best cards ever. The Gray Felt Pikachu, that one right now is doing it. The Blaziken from Chilling Reign, that card's doing it. A lot of Sword and Shield cards, you're seeing that happen right now. Potential value increase after grading. That's a huge part of it. If you're into Pokemon cards from the investment or making some money on things by buying raw cards and grading them out, you can definitely increase your value. But the problem is, though, is you don't want to do what I've done. I've owned 2 Moonbrian PSA 10s, pulled them with my kids, we graded them, and I sold them each for $1,000. That was back in the summer of 2024. Now those cards are about $3,300 in PSA 10. The same with the Rayquaza VMAX from Evolving Skies. I've sold 3 of those in a PSA 10 over the last 2 years, and I sold them for roughly $500 to $600 each. Now that card's worth well over $1,000. So you have to be careful when to sell, when to hold when it's a PSA graded card. Now, the Gem Mint 10, down here it says it can increase the value by 10 times. It can, but 10 times is a little bit much. I would say 2 to 3 times is usually what it's going to be. So, for instance, with the Moonbrion, it's about a $1,500 card. It increases the value to about 2 to maybe about 2.5% or 2.5 times. Now, the Mint 9 increased from 3 to 5 times the original value, not necessarily the truth on modern cards. Vintage cards, yes, they can definitely happen because people cannot find PSA 10 values of them, so they'll get a 9 just because they know it's a verified card. And then a Mint 8 or near Mint to Mint 8, that's what that NM to MT stands for down here, is a 2 to 3 times original value. Not on modern, but sometimes on the vintage you'll start to see that. Now, common submission mistakes to avoid. Mistakes that can affect the grade and proper card handling. Don't mess with them too much. Okay, submitting damaged cards. If you know they're damaged, they're not going to get graded. If they have creases in them, wrinkles in them, water damage, they won't get graded. If they've been cut somehow or been marked on, you're not going to see a grade on those either. Now, incorrect submission types. If you submit cards and you submit them incorrectly by saying maybe that they're German when they're from Italy or they're English when you said Japan, sometimes they won't get graded either. And there's just some cards they don't grade. The metal cards from the UPC, from the Celebrations 25th anniversary, those metal cards were getting damaged as they got graded, so they quit grading them. Now they grade them again. But the few cards that got graded out of that UPC right away, those were worth well over $1,200 for the Charizard. Not using proper sleeves. This can happen just by putting stuff in the wrong sleeves if they're not semi-rigid and they are rigid. And overestimating cards' condition. Thinking that cards are going to grade out at 9 and 10s when really they're 5s or 6s, selling them raw is the way to go. Ignoring potential restoration. Some people will show you online on YouTube, TikTok, whatever it may be, how they can restore cards and make them better. I would avoid it because it's probably not worth it to have it done. I don't know how these work. I've never actually tried to restore a card. I've wished many times my cards were in better shape from when I had them from when my kids were younger, but it's just not the case. So I try to avoid anytime I can some of those scams where they say, hey, send us your cards, we'll get them so they look better. Just because they have an Umbreon, just because it's an Eevee, it's going to be worth a lot of money. It's not the case. I usually go to the PSA website and check the gem mint rate or the population of the card, or I go to Pokemon card values. It's the chart grading for Pokemon cards. It does an amazing job. Okay, there's plenty of apps out there that'll do as well, but definitely make sure you research it because a PSA 10 might not even be worth the price of actually getting the card graded. Now, after you grade, some of the next steps. You carefully open the package, verify all the cards are present. This happens a little bit more often than you'd think. Make sure they're all there accounted for. Okay. Now your shipping, if it's getting sent back to you, is insured because you're paying for that shipping to come back. If you leave them at the PSA vault, they will do what you want with them. they will hold on to them, or they will put them on eBay and list them at a buy it now price or an auction. It's your choice. So PSA Vault's always a good option as well. I like to personally have the cards back so I can shuffle through them and see what kind of grades I got. Now I want to check the grading labels, make sure they are the same as what I got with the cards I sent in versus what the submission form and then the grades they sent me versus what's on the label. It doesn't happen often, but you can see a mistake on there. And consider the professional storage. You can buy boxes or briefcases that are actually there with packing foam in them, or they have like the 8 carton foam. And what it does with that, oh, we got a reboot thing coming on here. Sorry about that, guys. The value, or not the value, but the storage of those can range from a lot of different. I usually just have a nice little box that I have that has a spaced out that keeps the storage in. I don't keep all my PSA cards. I sell a lot of them, but I do have a collection that are valuable and not so valuable that hold a little bit of sentimental value. Now, get valuable card insurance. Your homeowner's insurance may cover your cards, but you have to have a pretty good dictionary of what's going on with those so you can have records of what the cards are. Also, you can buy graded card and raw card insurance and actual sealed collection insurance. Something I consider if you have a house that has a bunch of stuff in there. People are crazy right now for Pokemon. Would someone possibly break in? Maybe. FedEx or UPS maybe steal your graded cards? Maybe. So you have to be careful. You got to protect your investments. Deciding to keep or sell. This is the tough one. I cannot keep all of them. I have to sell some of them because it keeps the hobby going for me. But finding out which ones I want to keep and sell, usually it depends on not necessarily the value, but how I remember pulling the card, whether it's myself pulling it in a car one day or pulling it with my kids when they were younger or my kids right now when they're older. Some of the sentimental ones are the ones I hold on to the most. I have some PSA 6s I'll never get rid of because I remember when my kids got them, showed them to their friends at school, carried them in their pocket, but it still didn't matter because that card has so much meaning to me. Researching the market value on these is a big thing. Know whether you want to submit these on eBay or you want to just sell these locally. Remember, with about the 15% fee you're going to have on eBay, sometimes selling them locally can save you a little bit of money. On TCG Player, there's definitely options where you can say this is a PSA 9 and PSA 10. Usually you don't see PSA 10s on TCG. You'll see PSA 9s and lower because they're about that raw value. Now, you're ready to submit your cards. The final tips. You got to research a little bit more. Choose the right submission service. Protect your cards. Understand the grading process. Right there's your website. You got to turn your cards into a very nice collectible investment. Okay. Now, check us out, guys. Pokesoda. We got 45 subs right now. I think we're up to closer to 50 right now is what it is. If you like what you see, follow us. We're going to go over that. When our cards come in for grade submissions, we're definitely going to go do a submission pod or submission video on it. So check us out, guys. And like I said, Pokesoda on YouTube. And remember, catch them all.